Michael was also my father's name, and I was fascinated as a young boy when he told me this story about someone who was in their mid-30s that were a trader, I think, and he was talking about them and a few other people he knew who had gone off and they'd retired, I think somewhere like Singapore. And so that was an incredible story. And look, the dream could be to retire at 30, 35, 40 and live off index funds, right? That's the financial independent, retire early or FIRE strategy. It's very, very popular these days. But you just got to watch out. In this video, I'm going to talk about traps that can destroy your savings and your wealth, even if you're a disciplined saver, I feel anyway. So this could apply to you if, maybe you're retiring already, you're already retired, or you're coming close to retirement, or you're just even considering it. Like maybe you're young, you're in your 20s and you've heard of this FIRE thing and you're like, that'd be kind of cool, retire in my 30s or 40s, have the rest of my life to enjoy and not have to work the 9 to 5. It's quite popular, right? So again, this is going to affect everybody. So these are just traps that if you're not aware of, you can fall into. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how you can avoid these traps. Now, of course, saving, investing, buying index funds, stocks, you name it, that costs quite a bit of money. But something that's totally free is clicking on that subscribe bell notification button, and it just helps the algorithm, and it really motivates me to offer more of these free investing and personal finance videos. You'll never miss them ever again. So thank you so much, you guys. Another thing that I'm offering for free, by the way, is the 10 money moves PDF below. It gives you 10 big tips, big nuggets. I wish I had this when I was young in terms of major things to do to really get you really mastering money overall. Totally free, like you got the summary in one page in a PDF. You can just click down below to get that guide. And who am I even to talk about this, right? For 20 years, I've been an academic. I've been a professor. I've been a student before that, of course. And I've been in the East Coast of the US. I've also worked in Europe, Ivy Leagues, Federal Reserve, networking with Nobel Prize winners, having multiple degrees, etc. So that's just my background, but I'm also an active investor for almost a decade now. So I started and I made my first, fortune, if you want to call it, in stocks and index funds. And then I kind of started switching into real estate, more active investing, short-term, long-term, single-family, multifamily, fixer-uppers, buy and holds, etc. Some other alternative investments too. I just want to give you guys a disclaimer up front. I am pro-freedom. I'm not anti-FIRE. Okay, so this is not supposed to be fear. I'm not trying to give you guys any fear-mongering here. I'm trying to be real with you and talk about risk management, because really you want to be your own chief financial officer. You want to be your own chief investment officer too. So let's just get straight into it now and talk about the first trap I see, which is kind of like a sequence of returns trap. So, if you're about to retire or early into your retirement, this thing can suck, which is basically, to keep the numbers concrete, let's just say that you've got $1 million that you're retired on, and you're using the standard 4%. So you take out 4%, that's 40,000, and you live on that 40,000 a year. We're going to keep it really, really simple in this example. Don't need to go into much more detail, but you're going to live on 40,000. Now, what happens if you have 2 bad years, right? It's like 1929, the Great Depression all over again. Maybe you have a 20% decline in the first year, a 10% decline in the second year, and you're also, you're living on your money, so you're pulling money out of your fund, your nest egg is depleting. After just 2 years, whether you take money out at the start of the year, at the end of the year, you have roughly at that point only $650,000 left over. And if you're still taking out 40,000 a year, well, that now represents a much bigger slice. That's now 6.2%. Now, there are ways you can mitigate this. There's ways you can kind of get out of this, which is basically thinking things like, having a long cash buffer, like 2 years back in work, like having a good bit of buffer. You want to have your moats set up around you. But also, maybe just consider having more dynamic withdrawal rates. So not taking out everything at once. So if the market goes up, you can take out a little bit more. But when the market goes down, you want to try to reduce how much you're withdrawing. Now, I know you've got expenses and you've got to pay bills. And that's why this is a little more complicated, right? So there's things like the Goiten-Klinger rule, but other ways of getting around it is things like, having part-time income. Like if you're in your 30s or 40s and 50s and you're watching this and you're thinking, maybe I could do some part-time work. If you're a teacher, maybe you could do some substitute teaching, right? Just part-time. Also having cash flow assets like real estate, which I'm a big proponent of, right? They're really good for to mitigate some of this risk. With sequence of return risks, you don't have decades to overcome this. Like if you're only 20 and you're not planning on retiring till you're in your 60s, sure, you've got lots of time to ride if the market's going down. But when we're talking about FIRE, we're thinking about retiring very soon, or we're already retired. So at this point, like these depressions or recessions at least, they are really going to affect us. So it's good to have these measures that we put in place to reduce our risk. Now, beyond the sequence of return risk, we could think about things like health risk, on geographic risk. So health risk, you're very, very close to the line at certain levels of income. For instance, in the US, there is the Affordable Care Act. And it used to be the case up till 21, where if you had more than, or you're making more than 4 times the poverty level, you get nothing. You get no premium subsidies. Now that was brought back in, you were allowed to get subsidies, but right now it's only there until 2026, so it may disappear. We have to wait and see what happens. So there are a lot of these cliffs. There's multiple other ones I won't go into now, but it's happened to me. I've been there like when I was years ago, when I was in between degrees, where these thresholds really kick in, where all of a sudden like you're incentivized not to work, etc., not to make another dollar. Like one more dollar of, let's say, MAGI or modified adjusted gross income, that can mean you're not eligible for a single dollar of subsidies, right? So you can lose thousands of dollars like that just by making a little bit too much. That's pretty bad. It's not a good incentive. There are other things that phase out. A lot of these plans, like they might be there for a while, but they may go out, and there may not be enough money for them or political willpower to continue them. You can also get stuck with out-of-pocket expenses, healthcare expenses that you just weren't expecting. Now, another thing I think that's related, and for some of us, it's geographic arbitrage. Maybe you're from New York and you want to go to a cheaper, like a low or no tax state like Florida, something like that. Or you want to go to Puerto Rico, or you want to go even further afield. Moving expenses, that's not free. But if you're thinking about international diversification, this is more also for the internationals that are watching this that are non-American people. So that means that they're not a green card holder, they're not a US person for tax purposes. Unless you're Eritrean and you're watching this, that's a little different. But typically, you're thinking about maybe going abroad. Now, you can do this as an American, if you basically get the foreign earned income exemption, or you decide to renounce your citizenship, right? Getting visas, foreign visas, is not cheap. You need proof of income tests, even the residency, like watching the number of days that you're in countries, out of countries, all the kind of conflicts, like tax conflicts you have. It complicates your life, right? Like, where do I school my children, right? If I'm international, like for those that are more going back and forth. This can apply to people who are not making that much money, digital nomads that are on the cheaper end, or they're just scraping by on FIRE because they decide they want to retire, they want to go to live in Thailand or Vietnam or somewhere like that, and they want to be able to have their money go further. Maybe they go to Mexico, they go to Colombia, they go to these countries. Moving costs are not free. Kids' schooling is complicated, even healthcare, etc. So there are ways of smoothing these things out, whether it's your healthcare or whether that's the geography. And that is, for instance, just income smoothing between your business, between dividends, and we'll talk about this a bit more, but even your savings account for your health, like a health savings account to help with your healthcare expenses. Having more intentional planning, so spending time deciding these things. Like, you spend so much time on some decisions that you're making, like the color of your curtains, some of the clothes decisions. We spend relatively little time making some of these big decisions, like intentional planning. So it's very important to put aside time and to really think how you can do this. For insurance too, and for medical tourism, just watch out for that one. Like when you're looking about going abroad, it could be that you're looking at getting stem cell treatment, or you're looking at getting, let's say for the guys here, maybe you're looking to getting hair implants, things like that, and the girls too, for getting BBL, etc. Whatever the thing is. No judgment here, just saying if you're looking for these treatments, sometimes people go abroad to get it cheaper. This is definitely my home country of Ireland. a lot of people historically, they go to Turkey for the hair transplants for the men. I think that football player, Wayne Rooney, for the UK, like he really popularized it. And a lot of people are doing it these days. I'm pretty sure Elon Musk has done it at one point or other. He doesn't admit it. But if you look at the pictures in the early 2000s and you look at pictures today, like he's got a lot more hair now than he had in the early 2000s. So medical tourism, it can be more expensive, so watch it. This applies to me, right? Because I live in Europe. I also live in the US. I work in the US, but I have family in Europe. I spend almost half of my time now abroad, just under half of my time at this point. So like this is a thing for anyone who's traveling, even if you're in the US and you're going between different states, right? And you're trying to like lower the cost of living, even within the same state. And you're saying, okay, well, I work in Philadelphia, I work in Seattle, I work in Chicago, I work in New York, I work in Boston, but let me commute because I can save hundreds of thousands of dollars from my house where I buy. Like, even that's going to affect, if you've got the further you are away, the more you're traveling, etc. These things are all things you got to watch out for. So plan. Intentional planning is the way to kind of mitigate a lot of this. You got things like relationship, identity, I would say, maybe status, purpose, like these things. These are also certain traps. Like in terms of when you're retired, you can suddenly find a lot of boredom. Like I know a lot of people now that retire and they're quite literally bored. Like they're not sure what to do. They had a purpose when they were working. I know even for myself, like I try to separate my identity. So I'm a professor, but like, will I be a professor in a few decades? I don't know. I may not. And the thing is that I put a lot of my identity into the academics, but it may not be something I'm there for life. I might not be a real estate person for life. I might not be an investor for life. I might do something else. So I think a loss of status is something that affects a lot of people, right? If their status, their identity is tied up in being a surgeon, a doctor, a teacher, and they suddenly stop teaching, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Maybe you're just cleaning up at a garage station and you stop doing that. You had purpose, you had someone needed you, you loved, maybe you're working in the service industry and you're in hotels or you're in restaurants or coffee shops and you love the social interaction, and now you're no longer doing that and you're bored, right? There's also a big thing. Now, I've kind of found this. I mean, I've mostly been single, but I've kind of found that there's a partner mismatch, which is, it's very difficult, especially when you're kind of going the FIRE direction, retiring early. And this is what happened like a lot in Japan at the elderly when they retire, and they haven't really been together that much while they were working at long work hours for maybe 20, 30, 40 years. And then there's a gray divorce, a lot of divorce where there's a mismatch. And this can be exceptionally true if the two of you are not working and maybe you're living somewhere else now, you're trapped. Like, will your partner want to leave the location? Maybe there's actually ties, like relationship ties, and this can be like the social capital that you need. It's very difficult, I think, to meet people that are on board for things like financial independent, retire early, because maybe they were with you because you were a surgeon, right, or you were this, and suddenly you're not, and it lowers your status, and there's that loss. So it's difficult to, this partner mismatch is definitely something to watch out for, that like you don't go into it blind. This can happen a lot of time to people who suddenly retire. There's also something like the post-retirement depression, which is real. Like you see this a lot of times, like people retire and then they're kind of queuing up for the graveyard, right? They're like, oh, like I guess I'm done now. Now it's all in your head. There's a great book called The Power of Subconscious Mind, and it talks about how like people like Isaac Newton were, still writing some of their greatest works right into their 80s, like Tennyson, the poet, Michelangelo, the artist, right? They did some of their greatest work like that. Some of the top investors in the world, like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger from Berkshire Hathaway, way into the 90s. I mean, Munger was just shy of 100, right? So again, this is something that you get, this post-retirement depression, and I know a few people that had that when they first retired. Now luckily they got over it pretty soon. And how did they do that? Like the solution was having a purpose portfolio, right? You could think about it like when you retire, do things like, maybe you like teaching, right? Like that could be something that you really enjoy. It could be online teaching, part-time teaching, substitute as a principal of a school. You could do consulting if that's something that you like to do. Like I think that, a lot of people as they get older, and this is the book, The Power of the Subconscious Mind, like as you get older, your mind is still pretty sharp. Like there's no need to retire at 65 or 55 or 45. And there used to be this thing of forcing people to retire. It's still true in certain areas. Like, because I think the mental capital for, like, they have decades of experience. I mean, they've got great personnel management skills. Like they've seen it all before. They know how to manage people, right? And they're pretty good with the business. They've got institutional knowledge. So it's terrible losing all that capital that they built up. So maybe consulting, doing part-time consulting, you get paid quite a handsome amount of money. But also building out your mind. Like a lot of people in their 60s and 70s, I know that the author of that book, his father, like became an expert in Irish in his 60s, and then became an expert in French in his 70s, and like became pretty renowned for it, and was teaching, I think, and having a school on languages, I believe, right up to the ripe old age of 99. So you can do a lot. So think about your purpose portfolio, like things that you can do to still give you a sense of purpose, teaching, consulting, building stuff. Now, another thing you can do is having these kind of rituals that are like social capital rituals. Now, you could think about this, if it's a societal thing, if you want to give back, like volunteering. I mean, a lot of people, like Dan Pena retired, and then he kind of did certain kinds of volunteering. He got paid for some teaching, but some teaching was free. A lot of talks are free. Things like weekly mastermind sessions, like where you're kind of organizing groups. It could be book clubs. It doesn't have to be paid, right? You can do book clubs with your friends. Just get involved. And another thing, and I think this comes back to, and this, I've seen this a lot in family members and friends, close members and close friends that have done these things. So it's not like I'm coming up with these things out of thin air. These are things I've observed, and these are things I'm kind of putting into place myself. Now, something I haven't done, but I have heard about, and I'm wondering now what you might think in the comments about this one, is having like a couple's expectations document, like really talking with each other. I mean, this can strengthen your relationship, and if it can't, well, maybe communication is something that needs to be worked on, right? Like having an expectations document, like what is it that we both want? What kind of lifestyles? Because again, you don't want to like have things that are totally different. Like one person wants to be sipping margaritas on a beach, and the other person wants to become, I don't know, a dance choreographer, very intense life in London or New York or somewhere like that. And maybe that like there's a clash. You can want different things as long as the lifestyles don't clash. Like maybe like one of them wants a lot of time with the other person, quality time, but also quantity time. But the other person wants to do something that it's not going to allow for time, because it's like they're very focused on creating another business. Maybe they're trying to, create generational wealth, and they don't have time for that. So having a document can help. Beyond that, we have things like currency risk, right? Like foreign exchange risk. We have real estate capital expenditures. Like what if like the roof caves in? What if, your plumbing caves in? It happened to me before. I had to dig up the road. Everything was just like, I've got to dig up the road. Now I've got, the actual main sewer on the road. Now I've got to hire a cop for like 2 days to just like to close the road down. I've got to pay a local cop to do that. Now I've got to, and it just got more and more, right? So having a lot of money, this is why it's really good to have like 6 months of the actual expenses in reserves for these properties. Like usually, like let's say even having rent times 6, that's actually pretty good. Like having rent times 6 if you really want. Like if you're getting $2,000 a month, having like a $12,000 fund per property is pretty good. Insurance as well, right? Like when you think about travel insurance, like your insurance could go up, your travel insurance could go up. It may not cover certain things. You may have like childcare, elder care too. Like bake all these things in when you're thinking about retiring early. They're gonna surprise you if you haven't thought about these things. It's important to even your lifestyle inflation, things that you like to buy might be going up. Usually are more than the consumer price index, the CPI or headline inflation, right? So think about like, the CPI is 2%. I'm going to like base my model or my estimates on that. Well, it could be a lot more. It could be like 6% for what you actually want to buy. Your lifestyle stuff goes up more. Also, break things into, and this goes back to World War II, right? When they were developing things like they were the amount of guns that the US could produce, the amount of butter. But to win World War II, guns were must-haves. Butter was like nice to have. Like you can have bread without butter, you can have potato without butter, right? But it's not like a must. But guns to win the war was a must at that point. So try to break your things into needs and wants, or needs to have and must, are nice, like I guess must-haves and nice to have. So needs versus wants, or guns versus butter. Also, break things down in terms of like, maybe you can have bonds that can help you. Maybe having currency diversification. Like if you're going to Thailand and you want to live on Thailand, you may not want to have everything in the baht, right? The Thai baht, right? Or the Singaporean dollar, like if it goes down, etc. Like you want to think about having currency diversification. Also maintaining a sinking fund, right, for like an asset like real estate. If you do have a rental property, make sure that like it's not like there's not just zero in the bank. Like you want to have a good emergency fund for yourself, but also having a sinking fund per property. So if healthcare and geographic reality were the second trap, then identity, purpose, and relationship drift could be the third trap. I think a fourth trap would be something like cost and inflation surprises. Let me just throw in like a little bonus here. Something like a one asset dependence, or don't be dependent, or don't have all your eggs in one basket. You never know when there's going to be a regime shift. So for instance, like the US has done very good in terms of the stock market performance the last 150 years, right? Since the modern times, we have data going back, let's say to the 1870s. I'm thinking of the Schiller index on the S&P 500 and then the equivalent of that going back. But you could have like decades long flat markets, like in Japan with the Nikkei, for instance. And so we don't know, like a lot of other countries, like their stock markets have been flat for quite a long time in certain decades in certain countries. Whereas the US, like it's kind of, oh yeah, it's great, it's empirically gone up over time. So you want to think about diversifying your income. This is something that I do, right? So I also have real estate, long-term rentals, short-term rentals. Short-term rentals to catch the upside, long-term rentals just to kind of stable, etc. The thing with the long-term is, though, it can be vacant for quite a bit of time if you can't find tenants. And the price, you may have to just like put it rock bottom low, and there can be all kinds of issues. So it's good to have short term. At the same time, short term is more volatile, rules can change, and you might be into like a depression or recession for the actual tourism industry, like the COVID pandemic, for instance. So it's good to have diversification. Getting into real estate is nice because you have that cash flow, if you buy right, that can help pay some of your essentials. Another thing to do is considering digital products. Could you write a book, like an ebook? Could you do an audiobook? Could you do like creating a calculator, spreadsheets, things like that? Any kind of product whatsoever. It could be artwork, could be anything that can help people. Like what are the skills you have? I believe that if you've gone to, let's say, even high school or mid-school at this point, there's something that you can do. You could be consulting if you're, that's more skill set, right? Because digital products, I mean, again, if you've got no skills, you can at least start going down the copywriting area, right? Helping people write email ads, things like that. You could even do social media management, right? Like you can get into that very, very quickly on the social thing. E-commerce, I've dipped my toes in e-commerce and things, and drop shipping, things like that. That's another direction one can go in. I don't anymore like that model, just because a lot of it is like upfront costs, but there are ways of potentially mitigating it. Now, consulting is a great way. As your skills as you get more and more skills, more and more experience, you could consult. Even as a teacher, go back and do some teaching as a substitute teacher. If you're a principal of a school, if you're in business, like also having dividend income, right? Just that like the dividends, maybe it's like a high yield dividends. You think about having treasury bills or a T-bill ladder, right? So that like you stagger things out, that you buy these every month, every week, every quarter, every year, so that they're basically due. The next one is due, and then another one is due, and then another one is due, and you're not losing much interest. Having that kind of barbell kind of opportunity here with like low risk and high risk, right? So you may have like low risk over here, high risk over here, and you're saying, okay, I'm going to put like, just to even it out, right? Like it's like having low risk, right? It could be like having a lot of small plates over here, low risk, and maybe like the high risk is just one or two really heavy plates, but the two sides are the same total weight, because you have maybe like just a lot of weight per plate, and over here you've got small plates, but they're the same. I know that's not advisable if you're in the gym to do that, but technically both sides are the same weight, right? So that's the barbell optionality there. Now, an alternative is to think about, right, not just diversifying your income, but think about coast fire or lean fire or cash flow fire. You don't really have tremendous amount of money put away, but you also could have on the side things like rentals and the ability to work part-time. So maybe cutting down, like I have an aunt in her mid-80s that works 1 day a week by choice. Like she loves going in, but it also gives her some income as well. You know, and she loves going in and she gets that purpose and she gets the fun. It keeps her young in a sense, right? I know other people that like they've taken up businesses in their first time in their 70s and they've maybe been retired for 10 or 15 years and then all of a sudden they go back and they work for, you know, in a different area, a completely different industry. So having these kind of semi-retirement sprints, this is great. Like it's like Paula Pan says, retire early and retire often. You want to have like a semi-retirement, like you retire, take some time off, and then maybe start a new business, or maybe like getting into a new real estate deal, or maybe like teaching or doing consulting or starting anything you want to do that you didn't have time for before, right? You want to think of that barbell idea, right? You want to have like, you know, like your low risk and your let's say that the low risk here could be like your rental properties, maybe like your treasury bills, some bonds, and then you have a few, not many, a few upside things. Maybe it's a business that you're running, some kind of, maybe it's a hedge fund, right? Maybe it's like you're doing something like online business, you're maybe doing influencing or you're doing YouTube or something like that, whatever it is. You could think about also dynamic withdrawals. So that's really just not taking the same amount out all the time. Like maybe like, can you lower what you're taking out, especially when the market is down? And having other ways of kind of balancing. In other words, you're living off cash flow, you're living off other things as well. So having these kind of guardrails, really important, like in terms of, well, what percentages should I take out, etc. Here's a playbook. Have 2 years of spending. For instance, you could think about 12 months in cash and 12 months in something like bonds or short-term treasury bills. You could also, you know, one thing I've seen done is having these like buckets for expenditure. I think it's pretty cool, right? It's like, you know, you have your essentials bucket, right? That's like your bonds. You know, you put things in there like treasury inflation protected securities or TIPS. You can put in things like real estate, cash flow, things like that. That's for your essentials, right? So your real estate pays for your day-to-day living. Your bonds pay for your day-to-day living. Then maybe you have a second bucket. And in this bucket, we're going to label this bucket the lifestyle bucket. And here, this is for your lifestyle. Maybe like you want to get clothes. Maybe you want to like go out to the cinema. You want to go on dates. You want to go out, eat out, etc. Maybe that's where you take money out of your stocks, your equities. And maybe that's where you use some of your digital online income, if that's how you go. And then a third budget, right, for those that are aspiring for more, like an aspirational bucket. And this is maybe where the income is coming from is maybe you've got a business. Maybe you've got some venture that you're really trying to kick off. And again, you could use that for other things, right? So that aspirational is maybe like, okay, I want a really nice suit. Oh, I want to like upgrade my car. You know, I want to do something maybe like giving money to charity, right? Like starting something like new like that. Think about a stress test, like an annual fire stress test. Like just think about, okay, could I still do okay if there was a 30% fall in the stock market? If I had a 10% reduction from my real estate, from my rent that I'm getting this year, it could be vacancy or otherwise. If there was a 25% jump in the cost of my healthcare, maybe more frequent healthcare or some shock this year. So if you liked all this, then you can click below for free to download the 10 money moves. It gives you a PDF totally free on stuff I wish I had when I was starting out with personal finance, right? It's some of the biggest nuggets that I can share with you guys. If you just have these 10 nuggets, it'll get you through more than 90% of most people out there. Another thing for free, I just dropped it below just in case you want it, is the $10,000 property playbook. I got into my first deal for under 10,000 and you can too. This guide shows you how I did it, how I structured it, and really helps you get into your first property for 10,000 if that's what you want to do. I think real estate is one of the best ways to scale wealth, and I hope you do too. You don't have to do everything at once. You can do stuff just one step at a time. So let's build your wealth one property at a time, and I'll see you in the next one.